Nobody noticed the 16-year-old girl in seat 14C until the Boeing 737 started falling from 28,000 feet. When both pilots lost control and 198 passengers prepared to die, Emma Morrison stood up, walked to the cockpit, and said 5 words that changed everything. "I'm Eagle. I've got this." Emma Morrison pressed her forehead against the cold airplane window and watched Phoenix disappear beneath the clouds. Seat 14C, middle seat, the worst seat on any flight. But she didn't mind. She had her headphones, her calculus homework on her tablet, and 3 hours of silence before landing in Seattle. The businessman in 14B was already deep into his laptop, fingers flying across a spreadsheet. The woman in 14A had her nose buried in a romance novel, a half-empty bottle of water wedged into the seat pocket in front of her. Neither had looked at Emma twice when she'd squeezed past them to her seat. She was just another teenager. Ripped jeans, oversized hoodie, beat-up sneakers, dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, earbuds in, shutting out the world. Probably visiting family for Thanksgiving break, probably bored out of her mind. Nobody on Southwest Flight 2638 knew who Emma Morrison really was. Nobody knew that the faded Air Force hoodie she wore had belonged to her mother, Colonel Rachel Valkyrie Morrison, one of the most decorated F-16 fighter pilots in United States Air Force history. Nobody knew that her mother had flown 89 combat missions, earned the Distinguished Flying Cross, and trained dozens of pilots who went on to become squadron leaders and wing commanders. And absolutely nobody knew that from the time Emma was 8 years old until the day her mother died when Emma was 14, Colonel Morrison had secretly, methodically, and completely illegally trained her daughter to fly military aircraft. Emma shifted in her seat, trying to get comfortable, and pulled up her calculus assignment. Derivatives, chain rule, stuff that was supposed to be challenging for a high school junior. But after calculating thrust-to-weight ratios and fuel consumption rates in her head since she was 10, calculus felt almost easy. She caught her reflection in the dark screen of her tablet before it lit up. Green eyes, her father's eyes, though she barely remembered him. He died when she was 3, a training accident her mother never talked about. After that, it had just been the two of them, Rachel and Emma, Valkyrie and her little shadow. The memory hit Emma like it always did, sudden, sharp, stealing her breath. "Mom, why are you teaching me all this?" she'd asked. She'd been 12, sitting in a flight simulator at 0500 hours on a military base where her mother had pulled strings to get them access. The sun wasn't even up yet, and Emma was running through her third emergency landing scenario of the morning. Rachel had leaned against the simulator housing, arms crossed, watching her daughter with those sharp pilot's eyes that missed nothing. "Because you're gifted, Em. Your spatial awareness, your reflexes, your ability to think 3 steps ahead, you're a natural pilot, better than I was at your age, and talent like that shouldn't be wasted just because you're young." "But Mom, I can't even get my driver's license yet." Rachel had smiled then, that rare, genuine smile that made her look younger, less like a combat veteran and more like just a mom. Flying and driving are different. One requires maturity and judgment to navigate traffic and other idiots on the road. The other requires instinct and training. You have the instinct, baby, the best instinct I've ever seen. I'm giving you the training. When you're older, you'll understand why this matters. Emma blinked hard and focused on her calculus. No crying, not on an airplane. Full of strangers, not when she'd promised Grandpa Rob she'd moved on. She had moved on. 2 years since her mother's F-16 had been shot down over hostile territory during a combat rescue mission. 2 years since Colonel Rachel Morrison had died a hero, saving a downed pilot's life before her own aircraft was hit by anti-aircraft fire. 2 years since Emma's world had shattered into a million pieces. 2 years since she'd touched an aircraft's controls. After the funeral, full military honors, a flag-draped coffin, pilots from 3 different squadrons standing at attention, Emma had moved to Seattle to live with her grandfather, Brigadier General Robert Morrison, retired, her mother's father, a Vietnam-era fighter pilot himself, though he walked with a limp now from an ejection injury that had ended his flying career 30 years earlier. Grandpa Rob had known about Rachel's training program. He'd argued against it from the start. "She's a child, Rachel. This is dangerous and illegal. If anyone finds out, you'll lose your commission. And Emma could get hurt." But Rachel had been stubborn. She's a prodigy, Dad, and I'd rather have her overprepared than helpless. The world is dangerous. I fly combat missions. If something happens to me, I want to know that I gave her every tool she might need to survive, to excel, to be extraordinary. After Rachel died, Rob had made Emma promise, no more flying. Your mother is gone. You're 16 now. Focus on school, friends, normal teenage life. Flying is for later, for when you're 18, when you can do it legally and properly. Emma had promised, and she'd kept that promise. For 2 years, she'd been a normal teenager, straight A's at her new high school in Seattle, varsity soccer, fast with good field awareness that her coach said was unusual for someone who'd only played for 2 years, college prep courses, SAT studying. She'd even gone to junior prom last spring, though she'd left early because the music was too loud and the small talk felt pointless. She visited Grandpa Rob every day after school. They'd eat dinner together, watch old movies, not talk about Rachel unless one of them was having a particularly bad day. He was all the family she had left. He was enough. This trip was routine. Thanksgiving break, 5 days in Seattle, helping Rob cook a turkey that would be too big for just 2 people, watching football, maybe hiking if the weather cooperated. Then back to Phoenix, where she lived in her mom's old house, the one Rachel had bought before Emma was born, the one the Air Force death benefits had paid off, the one Emma rattled around in like a ghost. Just a normal trip, just a normal teenager flying to see her grandfather. Emma turned up her music, something indie, melancholy, perfect for staring out airplane windows, and tried to focus on derivatives. She had no idea that in exactly 8 minutes, nothing would ever be normal again. The sound came first. A bang, loud, violent, like someone had hit the bottom of the aircraft with a sledgehammer. The whole plane shuddered. Emma's headphones were playing music, but she heard it anyway. Her hands froze on her tablet. Every muscle in her body went rigid. That wasn't turbulence. Her mother's voice was crystal clear in her memory. You'll know the difference, Em. Turbulence is rough air, bumpy, uncomfortable, but the aircraft moves with it. Mechanical failure sounds different, feels different. There's an impact, a wrongness, like the aircraft is fighting itself. Around her, passengers gasped. The businessman in 14B looked up from his laptop, confused. The woman in 14A grabbed Emma's armrest, her book falling to the floor. What was that? Someone behind them said loudly. The shuddering intensified. The overhead bins rattled. Somewhere in the back of the plane, someone screamed. Emma yanked out her earbuds and listened, really listened, the way her mother had taught her. The engine sound was wrong. She could hear it even through the fuselage. One engine running rough, the pitch too high, and a whining noise, a hydraulic pump struggling. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, professional, controlled, but Emma could hear the tension underneath. Flight attendants, be seated immediately. That was it. No passenger announcement. No, we're experiencing some turbulence or a minor technical issue, just an order for the flight attendants to strap in. Emma's heart started to pound. That told her everything. The pilots were too busy fighting for control to worry about calming passengers. This was bad. The woman in 14A squeezed Emma's arm. Is this normal? This doesn't feel normal. Emma opened her mouth to respond, but the words died in her throat as the aircraft suddenly pitched forward, not a gentle descent, a dive. Passengers screamed. Bags tumbled from the overhead bins that had popped open. Someone's phone flew through the air, smashing against a window. The woman in 14A was crying now, her fingernails digging into Emma's arm hard enough to hurt. The angle was getting steeper. Emma could feel it in her inner ear, in the way gravity pressed her forward against her seat belt. 15 degrees nose down, 20, 25. The captain's voice came again, and this time even the professional veneer was cracking. Ladies and gentlemen, we have experienced a serious control malfunction. We are attempting to stabilize the aircraft. Assume brace positions. Flight attendants, prepare for emergency landing. But Emma knew they weren't preparing for landing. They were preparing to crash. The dive angle was too steep, the aircraft's response too sluggish. This was a flight control system failure, hydraulics or fly-by-wire, something catastrophic that made the aircraft nearly unflyable. At this angle, at this rate of descent, they had maybe 3 minutes before they hit the ground, 3 minutes before 198 people died. The businessman in 14B was praying, hands clasped, eyes squeezed shut. The woman in 14A was sobbing. All around Emma, passengers were crying, praying, calling loved ones on cell phones to say goodbye. They had all accepted it. They were going to die. Emma's hands were shaking, her whole body was shaking. She was 16 years old, and she was about to die on an airplane, and she'd never see Grandpa Rob again, never graduate high school, never become the pilot her mother had trained her to be. And then, through the fear and the shaking and the screaming, she heard her mother's voice. Not a memory this time, something deeper, something that cut through the panic like a knife. Emma, you know what to do. Emma unbuckled her seat belt and stood up. Where are you going? The businessman shouted, grabbing at her arm. Sit down. We have to brace. I'm going to the cockpit, Emma said. Her voice sounded strange, calm, steady, nothing like the terrified teenager she felt like inside. Are you insane? You can't. You're just a kid. But Emma was already moving, using her soccer-trained balance to navigate the tilting aisle, grabbing seatbacks to keep from falling as the aircraft's nose pitched down further. 30 degrees now. They were in a power dive. Altitude alarms had to be screaming in the cockpit. Around her, passengers stared at her like she'd lost her mind, a teenager walking toward the cockpit while everyone else prepared to die. Maybe she had lost her mind, but she couldn't just sit there and do nothing. She reached the front of the cabin, where a flight attendant, a young guy, maybe mid-20s, named Marcus according to his tag, was strapped into the jump seat, his face white, his hands gripping the armrest so hard his knuckles were bone white. I need to get into the cockpit, Emma said. Marcus stared at her like she was speaking a foreign language. What? No, absolutely not. Get back to your seat. I'm a pilot. My mother was Colonel Rachel Morrison. She trained me. I can help. That's impossible. You're what? 16, 17. You can't be a pilot. The aircraft dropped again, a sickening lurch that made Emma's stomach flip. More screaming from the cabin. They were out of time. Emma grabbed Marcus by the shoulders and looked him dead in the eyes. I'm 16 years old. I have 1,200 simulator hours and 300 real flight hours. My mother was one of the best fighter pilots in the Air Force, and she trained me from the time I was 8 because she saw that I had a gift. And if you don't let me into that cockpit right now, everyone on this plane dies, including you, including me. So make a choice. Something in her voice, the absolute certainty, the command that didn't belong to a teenage girl, made Marcus hesitate. The aircraft's nose angle hit 35 degrees. The altitude alarm was loud enough that Emma could hear it through the cockpit door. They were falling out of the sky. Marcus made his decision. He grabbed the intercom phone, his hand shaking so badly he almost dropped it. Captain, there's a passenger who says she's a pilot. She claims her mother was Colonel Rachel Morrison. She wants to help. Silence, just the screaming of wind and engines and terrified passengers. Then a voice, rough with desperation. Send her in. Marcus practically threw himself out of his seat to unlock the cockpit door. Emma stepped through into chaos. The first thing Emma saw was Captain Williams pulling back on the yoke with both hands, muscles straining, sweat pouring down his face and soaking his uniform shirt. He looked like he was trying to bench press a car. The second thing she saw was First Officer Davis working the controls with frantic, jerky movements, his eyes darting between instruments, checklists, and the windscreen that showed nothing but clouds and earth spinning closer. Hydraulics are gone, Davis shouted. Fly-by-wire is failing. We've got maybe 40% control authority. Emma's eyes went immediately to the instruments. 2 years since she'd been in a cockpit, but her mother's training was burned into her muscle memory. Altimeter. 24,000 feet and dropping fast. Vertical speed indicator. 4,500 feet per minute descent, way too fast. Attitude indicator. 35 degrees nose down. Airspeed climbing into the red zone. They were accelerating toward terminal velocity. Engine instruments. Number 1 engine temperature climbing, stress from the dive angle forcing it to work too hard. Williams barely glanced at her. Who the hell are you? Emma Morrison. My mother was Colonel Rachel Morrison, F-16 pilot, call sign Valkyrie. She trained me from age 8. I've logged over 1,500 hours total, simulators and real aircraft. I know emergency procedures. Tell me exactly what's happening. Williams looked at her like she'd grown a second head, but he was out of options. Both hydraulic systems failed after some kind of explosion in the tail section. We've got partial flight control through the backup systems, but the aircraft won't respond properly. We can't pull out of the dive. We've tried everything. Emma stepped closer, her eyes scanning the panel. The Boeing 737 wasn't that different from the aircraft she'd trained in. Bigger, more complex, but the fundamentals were the same. Lift, drag, thrust, weight. Physics didn't change just because the aircraft was commercial. Altitude 22,000 feet. They had, maybe 2 minutes before they reached the point of no return. Her mother's voice came back to her, teaching her about hydraulic failures. When you lose hydraulics, you lose finesse. The aircraft becomes heavy, unresponsive. You can't fight it with brute force. You need to use what you have left differently: power, pitch, unconventional inputs. You need to think like a test pilot, not a line pilot. Have you tried asymmetric thrust? Emma asked. Williams and Davis both turned to look at her. What? Williams said. Asymmetric thrust. Use engine power differential to help control pitch. Reduce power on engine 1, increase power on engine 2. It'll create an unbalanced thrust vector that can help pitch the nose up when your elevators aren't responding. Davis's eyes went wide. That's insane. That could make it worse. We could lose control entirely. You've already lost control, Emma said. Her voice was steady, but her heart was hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. You're in an unrecoverable dive with failed hydraulics. Conventional procedures aren't working. You need unconventional procedures. How do you know about asymmetric thrust? Williams demanded. That's not in any commercial aviation manual. It's a combat recovery technique. My mom taught me. She used it once when she lost hydraulics over Afghanistan. She brought her F-16 back on one engine and asymmetric thrust. It works when conventional controls fail. Altitude: 20,000 feet. Williams stared at Emma for one long second. She could see the calculation in his eyes. Trust this crazy teenager who claimed to be a pilot, or keep doing what wasn't working and die? Do it, he said to Davis. Adjust the throttles like she said. Davis's hands were shaking, but he obeyed. Emma leaned over his shoulder, watching the throttle levers. Reduce number 1 to 60%. Increase number 2 to 90. The engine sounds changed immediately. The aircraft shuddered, vibrating through the frame. The asymmetric thrust created an unbalanced force trying to pull the left wing down, but the nose angle started to decrease. 35 degrees, 33. It's working, Williams breathed. Oh my God, it's working. Now use elevator trim manually, Emma said, her voice faster now, more urgent. Small increments. Don't force it. The aircraft is fighting you. Let it find its own balance point. Williams reached for the trim wheel, adjusting it in tiny increments. The nose continued to rise. 29 degrees, 27, 25. Altitude 18,000 feet. They were still descending, but the rate was slowing. The vertical speed indicator showed 3,000 feet per minute, then 2,500, then 2,000. You need to declare an emergency, Emma said. Get F-16s scrambled. They can provide visual guidance and relay communications to ground if your radios fail next. Williams was already reaching for the radio. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Southwest 2638. Catastrophic flight control failure. Attempting recovery with passenger assistance. He paused, looked at Emma. What's your call sign? Emma hesitated. She hadn't said it out loud in 2 years. Her mother had given it to her during a simulator session when Emma was 12. They'd been running emergency scenarios all morning, and Emma had just executed a perfect dead stick landing after a simulated double-engine failure. Rachel had pulled off her headset and looked at her daughter with something like awe in her eyes. You see problems 3 steps ahead, just like an eagle sees prey from miles away. You don't react, you anticipate. From now on, you're Eagle. Emma had worn that call sign like armor, sharp-eyed, swift, deadly accurate. But when Rachel died, Emma had buried Eagle along with Valkyrie. No more flying, no more call signs, just Emma Morrison, normal teenager. Except she wasn't in the cockpit of a dying aircraft as a normal teenager. She was here as Eagle. Eagle, she said quietly. My call sign is Eagle. Williams keyed the radio. Southwest 2638 declaring emergency. We have catastrophic flight control failure. We are attempting recovery with technical assistance from passenger, call sign Eagle. Request immediate F-16 escort and emergency vectors to nearest suitable airport. Static, silence, then a stunned voice from air traffic control. Southwest 2638, did you say call sign Eagle? As in Eagle Morrison, Colonel Morrison's daughter. Before Emma could answer, a different voice cut in, military, sharp, professional, and shocked. Southwest 2638, this is Viper lead out of Portland Air National Guard. Confirm, is that Emma Morrison? Is that Valkyrie's daughter? Emma's hands were shaking now. She gripped the back of the first officer's seat to steady herself. Confirmed, Viper led, this is Eagle. A pause, then the military pilot's voice came back rough with emotion. Eagle, Viper led copies. Your mother trained half our squadron. We're scrambling now, help is coming. What do you need? Emma closed her eyes for just a second. Her mother had trained these pilots. They knew Valkyrie, and now they were about to find out what Valkyrie's daughter could do. Viper lead, I need you to contact Brigadier General Robert Morrison, retired. Tell him his granddaughter is flying. Tell him, her voice cracked, tell him mom's training mattered. Eagle will relay that message. Stand by. Altitude 15,000 feet. The aircraft was mostly level now, though still descending. Williams and Davis were working the controls with Emma coaching every adjustment. Airspeed is still too high, Emma said. We need to deploy speed brakes, but carefully. If the hydraulics are compromised, they might deploy asymmetrically. Speed brakes armed, Davis said. Deploying slowly. The aircraft shuddered as the speed brakes extended. The airspeed started to decrease. 310 knots, 300, 290. And then a new voice came over the radio, older, shaking with emotion. Emma would know that voice anywhere. Emma, this is Grandpa Rob. I'm at the Portland Air National Guard base monitoring emergency channels. I heard everything. Sweetheart, I know you can do this. Your mother trained you for exactly this moment. Emma felt tears streaming down her face, but she didn't wipe them away. Her hands stayed on the back of Davis's seat, her eyes on the instruments. Grandpa, I'm scared, she whispered. I know, baby, but you're also the best natural pilot I've ever seen. Better than me, better than your mom at your age. You've got this. Bring them home, Eagle. Show the world what Valkyrie's daughter can do. Williams looked at Emma, really looked at her for the first time, saw the tears on her face, the terror in her eyes that she was trying so hard to hide, saw the teenage girl trying to save 198 people. How old are you? He asked softly. 16, Emma whispered. I'm 16. Williams nodded slowly. Eagle, I'm handing you the observer controls. Talk me through this every step. I'll do what you say. You're the pilot now. For the next 23 minutes, Emma Morrison guided the recovery of Southwest Flight 2638. She talked Williams and Davis through control inputs that her mother had drilled into her during hundreds of simulator sessions, unconventional inputs that civilian pilots would never learn, combat techniques adapted for a crippled commercial aircraft. Reduce number 2 engine to 70%. Increase number 1 to 85. We need to compensate for the asymmetric drag from the deployed speed brakes. Adjust trim. 3 clicks forward, not 4, 3. Let the aircraft tell you what it needs. Watch your altitude, we're descending through 12,000. We need to level off at 10. Calculate your descent rate. You need to start the flare now, not in 30 seconds. Williams followed every instruction without question. He'd been a commercial pilot for 18 years, had landed aircraft in thunderstorms and crosswinds and emergencies, but he'd never seen anything like this. This teenage girl was reading the aircraft like it was speaking to her. The F-16s arrived at 12,000 feet. Emma felt it before she saw them, the slight turbulence from their jet wash, the shadow that flickered across the windscreen. She looked up and there they were, 2 F-16 Fighting Falcons sliding into formation on either side of the crippled Boeing 737. Eagle, this is Viper lead. We have visual. You're holding 12,000 feet, wings mostly level, slight right bank. You're doing incredible work. Emma's voice was hoarse from talking non-stop for 20 minutes. Thanks, Viper led. We need vectors to nearest suitable airport with longest runway and full emergency response capability. Portland International, 42 miles ahead, bearing 350, runway 10 left, 11,000 feet. We're clearing all traffic. You'll have the whole airport. 42 miles, maybe 15 minutes at their current speed. Emma did the math in her head. Fuel remaining, descent rate, approach angle, landing configuration. Her mother had drilled emergency landing calculations into her until she could do them faster than a computer. Viper lead, we're going to need a long final approach. Our control authority is limited. I can't guarantee we can make any turns sharper than 5 degrees per minute. Understood, Eagle. We're coordinating with Portland approach. They're giving you a 30-mile straight-in approach. No turns, no complications. Just point it at the runway and bring it down. The pilot in the left F-16, Viper lead, moved closer. Emma could see him through the canopy. He raised one hand, gave her a thumbs up. She raised her hand back, tried to smile, couldn't quite manage it. Eagle, Viper 2 here. I flew with your mom in Afghanistan. She saved my life once when I took ground fire and lost half my tail. She talked me through a landing I had no business surviving. Just like you're doing right now. She'd be so damn proud of you. Emma's vision blurred with tears. She blinked them away furiously. No time for crying. 198 people were counting on her. Thanks, Viper 2. Let's make sure everyone gets home to their families. The next 15 minutes were the longest of Emma's life. Every second was a battle against physics and failing systems and her own exhaustion. Her legs ached from standing, her voice was going raw, her hands shook with adrenaline. But she kept talking, kept calculating, kept reading the instruments and coaching Williams through inputs that felt wrong but worked. At 5,000 feet, Williams said, "We need to configure for landing, flaps and landing gear." Emma shook her head. Not yet. The hydraulics are too compromised. If we deploy the landing gear and it doesn't lock properly, we lose what little control we have left. Wait until 3,000 feet. One chance to get it right. At 3,000 feet, she gave the order. Deploy landing gear now. The mechanical rumble shook the aircraft as the gear extended. Green lights appeared on the panel, all 3 gear down and locked. Flaps to 5 degrees, Emma said. Not 15, not 30, 5. We don't have the control authority to handle the pitch change from full flaps. The aircraft shuddered as the flaps extended. The nose wanted to pitch up. Williams compensated with forward pressure and trim adjustment, exactly as Emma had taught him. At 2,000 feet, Portland International appeared. Ahead, a sprawling expanse of runways and taxiways and emergency vehicles. Emma could see fire trucks lining runway 10 left, a foam truck standing by, ambulances arranged in rows, preparing for a crash. Viper lead, we're on final approach, Emma said. Thank you for the escort. You guys should peel off before we land. If this goes bad, I don't want you in the debris field. Negative, Eagle, we're staying with you all the way down. That's what wingmen do. At 1,000 feet, Viper lead transmitted one more time. Eagle, your mother would be so proud. We all are. Now bring it home. At 500 feet, Emma's voice was steady despite the fear threatening to choke her. Speed is good, 140 knots. Descent rate is high but manageable. Don't try to force a smooth landing. Flare at 50 feet. A firm touchdown is better than trying to grease it. Just get it on the ground in one piece. At 100 feet, Williams said, I've got it from here, Eagle. Thank you. At 50 feet, he pulled back on the yoke, flaring for landing. The Boeing 737 hit the runway hard, too hard, way too hard. Tires blew instantly, rubber shredding. Sparks flew from the rim of the landing gear scraping on concrete. The aircraft bounced, came down again, stayed down. The nose gear collapsed. The plane's nose hit the runway with a screech of metal on concrete, more sparks, an explosion of debris, but Williams kept it straight, kept it on the runway centerline, let the friction and the emergency braking system slow them down. They were skidding, sliding, disintegrating, but decelerating, 60 knots, 40 knots, 20 knots. The aircraft came to rest 7,000 feet down the runway, tail slightly turned, one engine cell torn completely off, nose crushed, but on the ground, stopped. For 3 seconds, nobody in the cockpit moved. Then Davis started laughing, hysterical, relieved, disbelieving laughter. "We're alive. Oh my God, we're alive." Williams was crying, his hands still gripping the yoke even though they'd stopped moving. And Emma collapsed. Her legs gave out, and she sat down hard on the cockpit floor, her whole body shaking so badly she couldn't stand. Williams unbuckled, dropped to his knees beside her, and pulled her into a fierce hug. "You saved us. You saved all of us. How old did you say you were?" Emma's voice was barely a whisper. 16. "I'm 16. Through the cockpit windows, she could see emergency vehicles surrounding the aircraft, fire trucks spraying foam, paramedics rushing toward the emergency exits, and two F-16s doing a victory roll overhead before climbing back toward Portland Air National Guard Base. Davis was already opening the cockpit door, shouting to the flight attendants, "Everyone off. Emergency evacuation. Move, move, move." Williams helped Emma to her feet. "Can you walk?" She nodded, though she wasn't sure it was true. They stumbled out of the cockpit together. The cabin was chaos, passengers crying, hugging each other, trying to get to the emergency exits. Marcus, the flight attendant, saw Emma and pointed at her, shouting to passengers, "That's her. That girl saved us." People turned, stared, some started clapping. Emma couldn't process it. She just focused on putting one foot in front of the other, following the crowd toward the emergency exit. When she stepped out onto the wing and then down the emergency slide, her legs finally gave out completely. She collapsed onto the tarmac, gasping for air, her whole body shaking. Paramedics surrounded her immediately. "Are you injured? Can you breathe? What's your name?" "Emma," she managed. "Emma Morrison. I'm okay. I'm okay." But she wasn't okay. She was 16 and she'd just helped land a commercial aircraft after a catastrophic systems failure, and 198 people were alive because of her, and her mother was still dead, and nothing made sense anymore. Someone wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. Someone else was checking her pulse. Voices swirled around her, and then, cutting through everything, a voice she knew better than her own. "Emma." She looked up. Grandpa Rob was running across the tarmac, moving faster than she'd seen him move in years, his limp barely slowing him down, his face streaked with tears. Emma tried to stand, couldn't, fell back down. Rob reached her and dropped to his knees, pulling her into his arms so tightly she could barely breathe. "You did it," he was saying over and over. "You did it, baby. You brought them home. Your mother, oh, God, Rachel would be so proud. So proud." Emma buried her face in her grandfather's shoulder and finally let herself cry. Within 6 hours, Emma Morrison's face was on every news channel in the world. The video footage came from everywhere: passenger cell phones, news helicopters that had scrambled when they heard about the emergency, security cameras at Portland International, grainy footage of a teenage girl in an oversized hoodie walking into the cockpit, clear shots of F-16s escorting a crippled aircraft, dramatic images of the hard landing, sparks flying, the aircraft skidding to a stop. And then the passenger interviews. The businessman from 14B, whose name turned out to be Michael Chen, spoke to reporters with tears in his eyes, describing how she'd stood up when everyone else was praying, just a kid in jeans and sneakers who walked to that cockpit like she knew exactly what she was doing, and who had saved his life and everyone else's. The woman from 14A, Patricia Rodriguez, a mother of 3, recalled holding Emma's arm and crying, thinking they were all going to die, and how Emma had looked at her and calmly said she was going to the cockpit. She'd thought Emma was crazy, but in hindsight she was the calmest person on that plane. Captain Williams gave a statement from his hospital bed, where he was being treated for exhaustion and a minor concussion from the hard landing. "In my 18 years as a commercial pilot, I have never seen anything like what that young woman did. She knew procedures I've never heard of. She read that aircraft like she'd been flying 737s her whole life. Without her, we would have hit the ground at 400 knots. Everyone would have died." Emma Morrison is the reason 198 people are going home to their families tonight. The headlines wrote themselves. A miracle at 28,000 feet, a teen pilot who saved 198 lives, a 16-year-old girl who landed a crippled aircraft, the daughter of a legendary fighter pilot who used secret training to prevent disaster, call sign Eagle, a teenage pilot's impossible rescue. And then, as reporters dug deeper, the story got more complicated. A teen hero who'd flown 1,500 hours, all before legal driving age. A dead pilot who'd secretly trained her daughter from age 8. Child endangerment or a life-saving gift? The controversy behind the miracle. The Air Force investigates an illegal training program. The debate exploded across social media, news networks, talk radio. Everyone had an opinion about Colonel Rachel Morrison and what she'd done. She endangered her child. She broke federal regulations. She put her daughter at risk just to live out some fantasy of creating a miniature version of herself. She saved 198 lives. If she hadn't trained Emma, those people would be dead. Who cares about regulations when the result is heroism? A 16-year-old should not know how to fly military aircraft. This is child abuse disguised as education. Emma Morrison is the most skilled pilot anyone has ever seen at that age. Her mother recognized genius and nurtured it, and that's good parenting. The debate raged. Emma watched it all from a hospital room where doctors were keeping her overnight for observation. She was physically fine, but they were worried about shock and emotional trauma. Grandpa Rob sat beside her bed, his hand wrapped around hers, watching the news coverage with an expression Emma couldn't quite read. "They're going to investigate Rachel," he said quietly. "The Air Force, the FAA, they have too. She broke so many rules." "I know," Emma said. Her voice was hollow. She felt disconnected from her own body, like she was watching all of this happen to someone else. "Are they going to arrest me or take away my pilot's license?" "You don't have a pilot's license, sweetheart. You're not old enough," Rob said, squeezing her hand. "But no, they're not going to arrest you. You didn't break any laws. You were a passenger who provided emergency assistance. Technically, you never touched the controls. You told them what to do. You coached every input. You provided expert advice during a crisis. That's not the same as acting as pilot in command." His voice turned fierce. "And even if they wanted to prosecute, no jury in the world would convict the girl who saved 198 lives. You're a hero, Emma." "I don't feel like a hero. I feel like I'm going to throw up." A knock on the door interrupted them. A woman in an Air Force uniform entered, a colonel, older, with sharp eyes and an unreadable expression. "Emma Morrison. I'm Colonel Sarah Chen, Air Force Judge Advocate General's office. I need to ask you some questions about your mother's training program." Emma's stomach dropped. "Am I in trouble?" "No, but we need to understand what happened, how extensive your mother's training was, what regulations were violated, whether other personnel were involved." Colonel Chen pulled up a chair, her expression softening slightly. "I know this is difficult. You just went through something traumatic, but I need you to tell me everything." So Emma told her everything. The simulator sessions that started when she was 8, the gradual progression from flight games to professional-grade simulators, the pre-dawn trips to military bases where sympathetic pilots her mother had served with looked the other way while a colonel's daughter logged real flight hours in Cessnas and Pipers, the tactical training, the emergency procedures, the combat maneuvers, the 1,200 simulator hours and 300 real flight hours, all before she turned 14. Colonel Chen took notes, her expression never changing. When Emma finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Your mother violated approximately 47 different federal regulations," she finally said. "She compromised military security. She put you at risk. She involved other personnel in illegal activities." Emma felt tears burning in her eyes. "I know. And she also created the most comprehensively trained teenage pilot in aviation history," Colonel Chen continued. "The techniques you used today, asymmetric thrust for pitch control, manual trim adjustment with failed hydraulics, those are advanced combat recovery procedures that most commercial pilots will never learn. You saved 198 lives because your mother gave you tools that shouldn't exist, but were exactly what that situation required. So what happens now?" Colonel Chen stood. "Now there will be an investigation. Your mother's service record will be reviewed. There will be recommendations about whether her rank should be posthumously affected, whether her benefits should be reconsidered. You're going to take away her honors." Emma's voice cracked. "She died a hero. She saved lives in combat. And now you're going to destroy her legacy because she trained me." "I didn't say that." Colonel Chen's voice was gentle. "I said there will be an investigation. What I think personally is that your mother did something incredibly dangerous and completely illegal because she believed the risk was worth it. And today she was proven right. But that doesn't make it less complicated. She moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, Emma, I think your mother would be proud of you. Not just because you saved those people, but because you did it with honor. You didn't grandstand. You didn't take credit from the captain. You just quietly did what needed to be done. That's the mark of a true pilot. After she left, Emma and Rob sat in silence. What do you think Mom would say about all of this? Emma finally asked. Rob was quiet for a long time. I think she'd say that she knew this might happen, that she knew someday her training of you might come to light, and that she decided you were worth the risk, that you were worth everything. Was she right? You saved 198 lives today, Emma. What do you think? The press conference was scheduled for 2 days later. Emma didn't want to do it. She wanted to disappear, to go back to being a normal teenager, to pretend none of this had ever happened. But Grandpa Rob was gentle and firm. They're going to tell your story with or without you, sweetheart. Don't you want it to be the truth? So she agreed. The conference was held at Portland Air National Guard Base in a room packed with reporters, cameras, and military personnel. Emma sat at a table between Grandpa Rob and General Marcus Chen, the commander of the Portland Air National Guard. She'd dressed carefully, black pants, a simple blue blouse, her hair pulled back neatly. She looked older than 16, more serious, but her hands shook as she reached for the water glass in front of her. General Chen spoke first, giving the official account of the emergency, the mechanical failure, the deployment of the F-16s, the successful landing with assistance from a remarkably skilled passenger. Then it was Emma's turn. She looked out at the sea of cameras and faces and felt her throat close up. A reporter in the front row raised her hand. Emma, how do you respond to people who say your mother was irresponsible for training you? Emma's hands clenched in her lap. She forced herself to breathe, to think, to find the words. My mother saw that I had a gift, she said. Her voice was quiet but steady. Spatial awareness, reflexes, instinct, things you can't teach. You either have them or you don't. But she also knew that talent without training is useless. So she trained me. Yes, it was against regulations. Yes, it was dangerous. But would you rather those 198 people died because my mom followed the rules? Or are you glad they're alive because she believed I could learn? Another reporter. Do you think you should have been put in that position at age 16? I didn't choose to be put in that position, Emma said, her voice stronger now. A mechanical failure put me in that position. But my mother's training meant that when it happened, I wasn't helpless. I could help. And because I could help, people lived. But you were too young to have that knowledge. Emma felt anger flare, hot and sudden. Too young compared to what? I had more flight hours at 14 than most newly licensed pilots have at 18. I had more emergency training than most commercial pilots get in their entire careers. My mother didn't train me because she wanted me to be a child soldier. She trained me because I had the ability to learn, and she refused to waste it just because I was young. The room was silent. Another reporter, older, his voice gentle. Emma, what do you want people to know about your mother? Emma felt tears burning, but she didn't look away from the cameras. I want people to know that my mother was the best pilot who ever lived and the best teacher. She taught me that age and gender don't define capability. Training does. Skill does. Courage does. I'm 16 years old and female. Today I helped save a commercial aircraft with 198 people on board, and I did it because my mother believed in me when nobody else would have. Her voice was shaking now, but she kept going. Call sign Eagle didn't die when Valkyrie died 2 years ago. It just waited. And when 198 people needed Eagle, I was ready, because my mom prepared me for a moment I prayed would never come. But when it did come, her love and her training were enough. Emma paused, looked directly into the camera. My mother broke rules to train me. She risked her career. She risked everything. And people will debate forever whether she was right or wrong. But I know this. Because of her, I was able to help save 198 lives. Because of her, 198 people went home to their families. Because of her, I knew what to do when the sky was falling. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. Was she right to train me? Ask the 198 people who are alive today because she did. The room erupted in applause. Emma sat back, her whole body shaking. Grandpa Rob put his arm around her shoulders and pulled her close. "Your mother would be so proud," he whispered. "So damn proud." The questions continued for another 30 minutes. Emma answered all of them, some with confidence, some with uncertainty, but always with honesty. Yes, she wanted to be a pilot when she grew up. Yes, she would apply to the Air Force Academy. No, she didn't think every parent should train their children to fly. Yes, she understood why people were upset about her mother's actions. But through it all, she held to one truth. What her mother had done was complicated, perhaps wrong, but ultimately necessary, because talent exists in young people just as much as in adults, and sometimes preparing someone for the impossible is an act of love, not recklessness. When the press conference finally ended, Emma was exhausted. But as she stood to leave, Captain Williams appeared in the doorway. He walked straight to her and, without a word, wrapped her in a tight hug. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough. "Thank you for saving my life. Thank you for saving all of us." Emma hugged him back, crying into his shoulder. "Thank you for trusting me. How could I not?" Williams pulled back, smiling through his own tears. "You're Eagle, daughter of Valkyrie. That means something." 6 months later, Emma stood in front of 400 Air Force Academy cadets and tried not to throw up from nerves. She wasn't enrolled yet. She was still only 16, still in high school, but she'd been invited to speak at the academy as part of a leadership seminar on uncommon courage and leadership in crisis. Grandpa Rob sat in the front row, beaming with pride. Emma took a deep breath and began. "I'm Emma Morrison, call sign Eagle. I'm 16 years old. I still can't vote. I still can't legally drink. In most states, I can't even buy cigarettes or lottery tickets. But I have 1,500 flight hours, and I've helped land a commercial jet during a catastrophic emergency. And I'm here today because my story raises an uncomfortable question. When do we decide someone is ready to lead, to act, to save lives?" She paused, looking out at the cadets. They were older than her, 18, 19, 20, but they were listening intently. "People ask if my mother was wrong to train me. They say I was too young, that it was dangerous, that she was reckless. And maybe they're right, maybe it was all of those things. But here's what I know. My mother saw potential and refused to waste it just because I was young and female." She clicked to the next slide, a picture of her mother in a flight suit standing beside an F-16, fierce and proud. "This was my mother, Colonel Rachel Valkyrie Morrison, 89 combat missions, Distinguished Flying Cross, one of the best fighter pilots in Air Force history." And when she looked at her 8-year-old daughter, she didn't see a child who needed to be protected from the world. She saw a prodigy who needed to be prepared for it. Next slide. Emma at age 12 in a flight simulator, her face serious and focused. "She trained me in secret, violated regulations, broke rules, put her career at risk. Why? Because she believed that talent, training, and courage don't wait for permission. They don't wait for you to turn 18 or 21 or whatever arbitrary age we've decided makes someone ready. They exist now, in this moment, and they need to be nurtured." Emma's voice grew stronger. "On Southwest Flight 2638, I wasn't ready. I was terrified. I was 16. I wanted to hide in my seat and let the adults handle it. But the adults were out of options, and I had skills that could help. Skills I shouldn't have had, skills that existed because my mother decided that too young was less important than capable." She showed the next slide, an image of the damaged aircraft on the runway, emergency vehicles surrounding it. 198 people went home that day. They hugged their families. They went back to work. They kept living because a woman broke rules to teach her daughter what she needed to know. Was it illegal? Yes. Was it dangerous? Probably. Was it worth it? Emma looked directly at the cadets. Ask the 198 people who are alive because she did. The room was silent. "I'm not saying every parent should train their children to be pilots," Emma continued. "I'm not saying rules don't matter. What I am saying is that my mother looked at me and saw who I could become, not just who I was. She saw Eagle before I knew Eagle existed. And she prepared me for a moment she prayed would never come." She showed the final slide, a photo of Emma and Rachel together, Emma maybe 13, both of them in front of a small aircraft, both grinning. "My mother was Valkyrie, a legend, a warrior. And she taught me that legends don't die, they pass their knowledge to the next generation. She taught me that leadership isn't about age or rank or following the proper channels. It's about being ready when the moment comes. It's about having the skills, the courage, and the will to act when action is needed. Emma's voice dropped, became more personal. In 2 years, I'll apply to this academy. I'll become a pilot, the best pilot I can be, just like my mom. And when I do, I'll carry her call sign with honor. Not because she trained me illegally, but because she loved me enough to prepare me for moments I couldn't imagine, because she refused to let talent go to waste just because the person who had it was young and female. She paused, then finished. Valkyrie's legacy doesn't live in medals or records or history books. It lives in me, in every adjustment I coached on that flight, in every life saved because she decided that too young was less important than talented and trained and ready. Her legacy lives in the truth that heroism doesn't have minimum age requirements when preparation meets impossible crisis. Emma looked out at the silent room. I'm Eagle, I'm 16, and I'm proof that sometimes the rules need to be broken, not carelessly, but carefully, with purpose and love, so that when the sky is falling and 198 lives hang in the balance, there's someone ready to stand up and say, I've got this. The cadets rose to their feet. The applause was thunderous. Emma stood at the podium, tears streaming down her face, and felt her mother's presence like a hand on her shoulder. You did good, baby. You did so good. After the speech, dozens of cadets lined up to talk to Emma, to shake her hand, to tell her that her mother sounded like an incredible person. One cadet, a young woman named Sarah, hung back until the crowd cleared, then approached Emma quietly. My dad is a fighter pilot, she said. He's been deployed most of my life. And last year he started teaching me to fly, not officially, just taking me up in his plane, showing me things. I'm 17, I have maybe 50 hours. She looked at Emma with desperate hope. Did I hear you right? Is it okay that he's teaching me? Emma thought about it carefully, about regulations and safety and all the reasons her mother's training had been controversial. Then she thought about 198 lives saved. I think, Emma said slowly, that if you have the talent and the passion and the discipline, and if your dad is teaching you safely and responsibly, then you're lucky, because most people never get the chance to learn from someone who believes in them that much. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. Everyone acts like we're doing something wrong, but it doesn't feel wrong. It feels like he's giving me a gift. That's exactly what it is, Emma said. A gift. Use it wisely. After Sarah left, Grandpa Rob came up and hugged Emma. Your mother would have loved this, he said, seeing you speak here, seeing you own your story. Do you think she was right, Grandpa? Really? Rob thought about it for a long moment. I think your mother made a choice that could have gone terribly wrong. She put you at risk. She broke laws. She did things that could have destroyed her career and put you in danger. But she also gave you skills that saved 198 lives. So was she right? He smiled sadly. I think she was both reckless and right. And I think that's what love sometimes looks like, being willing to risk everything to give your child every possible chance to be extraordinary. And sweetheart, you are extraordinary. Emma leaned into her grandfather's embrace and let herself feel, just for a moment, the full weight of everything that had happened. 6 months ago she'd been a normal teenager. Now she was famous, a hero, a controversy, a symbol. But underneath all of that, she was still just Emma, a girl who missed her mother, a girl trying to figure out who she was and who she wanted to become. Grandpa, yeah, sweetheart, I want to fly again. Not just coach someone else. I want to actually fly. Rob pulled back, looked at her. Seriously, you sure, after everything that happened? I'm sure. Mom didn't train me just to use it once. She trained me because she wanted me to be a pilot, a real pilot. And I think I want that too. Rob smiled. Then we'll make it happen properly this time. Legal certifications, official training, the whole thing. But Emma, you've already proven you're a pilot, the best I've ever seen. Even better than Mom at 16. Yeah, even better than your mom. And she would be thrilled about that. Emma smiled through her tears. Call sign Eagle. Call sign Eagle, Rob agreed. Now and always. Emma Morrison, 18 years old, stood in the acceptance office at the United States Air Force Academy and stared at the envelope in her hands. She'd applied 6 months ago, submitted her transcripts, a perfect 4.0 GPA, her SAT scores of 1580, her athletic records in varsity soccer and track and field, her essay about leadership and crisis management, and her flight hours, now up to 2,000 total, every single one logged legally and properly over the past 2 years as she'd earned her private pilot license, then her commercial license, then her instrument rating, the youngest fully licensed commercial pilot in the country. But it was the recommendation letters that Emma thought had probably made the difference. One from Captain Williams. Emma Morrison saved my life and the lives of 197 other people. She has demonstrated leadership, skill, and courage beyond anything I have seen in my 18 years as a pilot. The Air Force would be lucky to have her. One from General Marcus Chen. I have observed Emma Morrison's growth over the past 2 years. She is mature, disciplined, and possesses natural piloting ability that cannot be taught. She will be an outstanding officer and pilot. And one from Brigadier General Robert Morrison, her grandfather. My granddaughter is the best pilot I have ever known. She is also honorable, compassionate, and committed to service. Her mother would be proud. I am proud. The Air Force will be proud. Now, holding the envelope, Emma's hands were shaking. Grandpa Rob stood beside her. Open it, sweetheart. Emma tore open the envelope and unfolded the letter. Dear Ms. Morrison, on behalf of the United States Air Force Academy, I am pleased to inform you that you have been selected for admission to the class of 2028. She didn't read the rest. She just turned to her grandfather and whispered, I got in. Rob pulled her into a fierce hug, both of them crying. Your mother would be so proud, he said. So incredibly proud. Emma looked down at the acceptance letter through her tears. At the bottom, someone had written a handwritten note. Welcome to the Academy, Emma, Eagle, Morrison. Your mother's legacy lives on in you. We can't wait to see you fly. 4 years later, Emma would graduate top of her class. She would earn her wings. She would be assigned to an F-16 squadron, the same squadron her mother had once commanded. And on her first solo flight as a fully qualified fighter pilot, she would take her F-16 up to 30,000 feet, level off, and speak into the radio. This is Eagle, Valkyrie's daughter. I've got the sky. And from the ground, her grandfather would listen and smile, knowing that Rachel Morrison's gift to her daughter, the dangerous, illegal, absolutely necessary gift of training and belief and preparation, had become exactly what Rachel had always intended it to be. Not a burden, not a controversy, but a legacy of courage that proved talent, training, and love can save lives at any age, when you're brave enough to believe that some daughters are born to fly, and some mothers are wise enough to give them wings.